Hey, Dan Strayton coming to you again from Health Unlimited Family Fitness and Aquatic Center in Mount Airy, Maryland. If you're at home right now trying to do a lot of exercises at home, there's a good chance you're trying to do some core training, some floor-based exercises in which you're trying to train your abdominals. So we're going to look at a few exercises there that exercise I see people do not as well as they could be done. We'll throw a couple other exercises in there that you could try, and we'll talk a little bit about really what your core is and what you should be focusing on or thinking about as you're training these so-called core muscles and doing these core exercises. So number one, the primary thing I want to talk about with your core is more than your abdominals, right? So it's more than just your stomach muscles. Your core really is all the muscles that are attaching to your rib cage, your hips, and their job is to stabilize this whole area, right? So the muscles, there are going to be muscles in your back, in your lower back, your mid back, any muscles that are deep in your core, attaching to your spine, some of the muscles that come down attached to your hips, your pelvis there. And their whole job, again, is to stabilize your midsection while you move your limbs around, okay? So the job of your core is not to flex and bend you as much as people think it is. All right? So a lot of times when we're focusing on a lot of abdominal exercises or core work, it tends to be a lot of flexion, a lot of sit-ups, a lot of crunches, a lot of that kind of motion. But in reality, in your everyday life, most of the work that your core is doing is primarily just to stabilize and brace you and hold this position and posture while you move things around. That's what's going to protect your back. When people talk about training their core and how much it protects their back, that's not, again, a lot of these flexion and sit-up muscles. Sometimes that can exacerbate back problems. We want to focus on the core muscles that are really bracing and stabilizing you. So, and again, any exercises in which you're actually not moving a whole lot through this area and you're just bracing and stabilizing yourself, those are the exercises you like to add more of those into your routine and maybe a little less of the flexion, sit-up, crunch-type motions that are in there. Number one of the things I always talk to people about too is if you look at those crunches and sit-ups, again, they're training your body to do exactly what they look like they're doing, right? Which is to have you go like this. Right? So most of us already have posture that's too far forward. We're sitting at computers all day, hunched over our desks, hunched over our phones, in our cars, in classrooms, sitting in front of the TV, whatever that might be. We tend to be collapsing that way already anyway. And then we go ahead and try to do some exercises and we just train our body to go that way even further and even more. So in reality, we need to do two things. We need to do core work that really is just bracing and stabilizing you and not flexing you. And then in reality, you need to do more work that is extending you and going the other direction. Okay, so we'll touch on one or two exercises you can do there. But we need to focus less on the forward bending, a little more extension, a little more bracing and stabilizing. Okay? So one of the exercises you'll see people do, and again, they don't quite get the full benefit out of it, is an exercise in which they're laying on their back and either sticking one leg out at a time or maybe lowering both their legs down at the same time. And the purpose of this exercise really is that as your legs are going down and going out, you're trying to keep your hips, your pelvis back, and your back somewhat flat on the ground. So as your leg moves forward, your leg goes out, the weight and movement of your leg is going to pull your hips and pelvis. It's going to start to roll forward, and your back's going to arch off the ground. And the job of your abdominals, your core muscles at that point, is to not let that happen. Keep your hips back. As your leg moves out, your hips stay back, and everything stays in one position, doesn't move. So as my legs are moving, my core is not. And that's what. So it's going to look something like this. Where you're on your back, what I have people do is they'll have both legs up here bent and just slowly reach one leg out. Pause and bring it back and then alternate the other side. Normally you lay your head back too, but I have my head up so I can speak to you guys on camera. But normally I lay back here. Something like that. Now again, as my leg is moving, the weight of that leg and the movement of the leg is pulling my hips. They want to roll this way and my back is now arching off the ground. The whole purpose is to not let that happen. So you're pulling your hips back, using these abdominal muscles. These core muscles are keeping things from moving here as that leg goes out, okay? If you try to lower both legs down at the same time, that's extremely difficult. Most people cannot do that correctly. If you're lowering both your legs down, there's a very good chance that your hips are moving, your back is arching, you're putting a lot of strain into your back. It takes a lot of emphasis and focus to as you move your leg to keep your hips back and keep these muscles very tight in here. One way you can tell if someone's not quite doing it correctly is they're going to have their hands wedged under their hips. See this a lot, right? Where people are doing something like this, all right? Or they're lowering one leg down, back and forth, right? The point of your hands wedged under here is because it makes it easier. It's because it's called cheating. All right, if I wedge my hands under here, it helps keep my hips back and my pelvis back. It helps prevent my pelvis from rocking forward. Well, that's what my stomach's supposed to be doing. My core muscles at that point are supposed to be keeping my hips back. So by putting my hands under there, all I'm doing is taking my core muscles out of it and relying purely on just the muscles of my leg or my hip flexors to raise my leg up and down. All right, so get your hands out of there and just focus on you using these muscles to keep everything flat in through here. Make it a little bit harder, add a little tweak of intensity to it. Just throw the opposite arm overhead. So as my right leg goes out, my left arm goes overhead, then bring it back. So what's happening in that scenario is, as my arm is going over my head, it might also want to try to pull my rib cage off the ground. Again, if I'm not quite flexible enough, I don't have the strength in there. So the same point there. As my arm moves, I'm trying to keep my rib cage down. As my leg goes out, I'm trying to keep my pelvis back and keeping everything solid through there. So that's one way to look at that or play around with that exercise. Similarly, if you are doing crunches or sit-ups in that position, we'll touch on that real quick. Is if I'm laying here, the biggest flaw I see in most people's routines here is all they tend to do is move their head up and down. All right, your abdominals are not connected to your chin. All right, so if you're doing sit-ups in which you're just doing this, okay, and just your head is moving up and down, that's not working your abdominals. Your abdominals are going to be pulling on your rib cage. So they're going to pull your rib cage, your shoulders, your head, everything should move in one big unit. So if I'm going to do something like that, everything from my rib cage up moves as one unit and stays straight. And I don't flex forward. That puts a lot of strain on my neck, and it doesn't really get those abdominals involved as much. So focus on keeping your head and neck in line with your spine, and everything moves up together, something like that. So if you are going to do sit-ups or crunches in that motion, just do that and try to avoid a lot of this just flexing of your head, flexing your neck there in that respect. All right, so people do a lot of other things we'll look at with things where you brace or stabilize. The most common one you'll probably see is some version of a plank, which is a very good exercise to do. You can work on that as well. So you might see people do that, where they get in a plank position, maybe something like here, and trying to hold a position, and that's fine. They can do different things out of that position, so a plank is good. Another good exercise I have people do is to get up in like a push-up type position in here. But instead of having your feet together, spread them out a little bit, bring your hands a little closer together, and all you're going to do is pick up one hand and touch your other shoulder with it. Or you make it a little bit harder, you can put it out in front of you. And the whole point is that when I pick this hand up, nothing else moves, all right? What you might see people do is as they pick this hand up is they roll, or they twist, or they slide their body weight over top their arm. Your goal is to tense and tighten everything so nothing else moves when you're doing that exercise. So it's another version of a plank out of a push-up position that you could try. That again will focus on training those core muscles in a way in which they're bracing and stabilizing you and not so much moving you. And then the final thing you can look at is back to what we talked about before, which is some kind of an extension. All right, so just flip over the other way. All right, be on the ground, and you could do something that's called like a cobra, where you look down, just pull your shoulders and arms back, something like this. Try to relax everything in the lower body. Just pull your shoulders back, maybe come up into a little extension. You can do some little arm extension as well, again, looking down the whole time, but you can come out here. All right. Anything that will put you up into an extension and move you the other direction instead of flexing and moving forward, we want to go back the other way. So again, play around with those things. Obviously look online, there's a lot of exercises out there in the world, but just something to think about. We need to brace and stabilize with our core and not flex so much, and we need to do a little more extension, work some muscles on the back side to counterbalance all this forward motion that we're in. So give that a try. Thanks for watching.